On this week's episode of the Best of Johnston County Podcast, our guest is the recently retired Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Transportation, Joey Hopkins. We talked to Joey about his time growing up in Eden, North Carolina, his going to NC State where he got a civil engineering degree, how he got started as a tech at DOT during an internship, and then how he ended up growing his career in his different stops all the way to being the Secretary of the Department of Transportation. We also talked to him a little bit about Helene and its effect on Western North Carolina and major road projects that are going to be going on in our area over the next few years, including the Complete 540 project and the expansion of Veterans Parkway, Highway 42, Highway 36 from NC 50 to Highway 70 in Clayton. So if you're interested in any of these projects or his career, which was absolutely fascinating, listen in.
Welcome to another episode of Best of Johnston County, brought to you by Breeden Law Office. Our host, Jonathan Breeden, an experienced family lawyer with a deep connection to the community, is ready to take you on a journey through the area that he has called home for over 20 years. Whether it's a deep dive into the love locals have for the county or unraveling the complexities of family law, Best of Johnston County presents an authentic slice of this unique community.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Best of Johnston County Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden. And on today's episode, we have the recently retired head of the North Carolina Department of Transportation, Joey Hopkins, who lives right here in Clayton, North Carolina, and has for like 20 years. We're going to talk to him a little bit about where he grew up, how he got into engineering, NC State graduate like me, go Wolfpack. His 35 years as Department of Transportation. He started at the bottom, ended at the top, how he sort of went through that process, and now what he's doing with his new business where he's a consultant for other people working on projects with the Department of Transportation. So talk to him a little bit about that, and of course, why he loves Johnston County. But before we get to that, we'd like to ask you to like, follow, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you see it, whether it be on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, X, TikTok, LinkedIn, or any of the other social media channels of the Best of Johnston County Podcast. The Best of Johnston County Podcast comes out every single Monday and has now for 2.5 years. So go back and listen to some of the previous episodes. We're well over 100 episodes now. We're probably by the time this one runs, probably at 120. So we've had a lot of great guests, interesting people that you would find interesting. If you love Johnston County as much as I do, this is the podcast for you. We can also use some 5-star reviews down below. Tell us what you like or what you dislike about the Best of Johnston County Podcast. Those 5-star reviews help us raise our visibility on the podcast platform so more people be aware of the Best of Johnston County Podcast. Welcome, Joey.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate the invitation.
No
appreciate
problem.
What you do.
Right. This is fun, right?
Really
this is a ton of fun. I appreciate you being willing to come in and talk to us. It's probably a little easier to do it as the retired head of DOT than the actual head of DOT because of how busy you were doing that. So anyway, state your name, what you do, a little bit like that. I sort of did an intro, but you probably do it better.
Yeah. Joey Hopkins, live here in Johnston County. We've been here since 94. Moved in with my wife, raised our kids here, just love it. And I am retired, like you said, been retired just over 2 months after a career with North Carolina DOT. And I am starting my own consulting business.
Man, that's exciting. You go from government work to the private sector. That's a big change, but I think you'll do just fine with that. So where'd you grow up?
So I'm from Eden in Rockingham County, grew up north of Greensboro, got family still there, and just matriculated down here with college and after I got married and been here for over 30 years now.
I got you. And you went to NC State?
Yeah, went to NC State.
What degree did you get?
So I got a degree in engineering, but I started in textiles.
Okay.
So Eden was a big textile town at the time. A lot of my family worked in the textile business or tobacco. And so I came down here to go into textiles and really liked it. Wasn't a very good student, but I was smart enough to realize that maybe that's not the right future and I wanted something more steady. I was also in the reserves to get money to help pay for college. I was in the Navy Reserves. I was a CB. And so that led me to the engineering side of things. So I switched to civil engineering.
Civil engineering. Okay. Yeah. I was going to figure out which engineering did you get. So, well, that's interesting. My father got a textile degree from NC State in 1968.
Okay.
And by 75, the jobs were evaporating as stuff had started to go off overseas and to Mexico even then, before NAFTA in 92, 93. Right. And he realized that he probably needed to do something else. So he went back to school. He went to UNC Pembroke and became a CPA.
Oh, no.
But couple of his cousins who stayed in textiles, including my uncle and my dad's first cousin, ended up at 50 years old out of work.
Yeah.
And that has been an adventure. Both of them figured it out. One of them ended up getting a FedEx route and delivered FedEx, and the other got into doing training and has actually worked some with Novo and Grifols here on some industrial maintenance training. He was an engineer. And so I'm glad my dad made that decision in 1975. At the time, with a baby on the way and a wife who was a nurse, don't know that was the best idea, but it worked out in the end. So it's smart that you saw that textiles may have not have been where things were going in the late 80s, and switched to civil engineering.
Yeah, that was definitely a fear of mine, and looking back now, I think it all worked out.
Yeah, well, it did all work out. So you started out with DOT straight out of undergrad?
I was actually still in college.
Okay.
And I worked as a summer intern, an engineering assistant in Guilford County for a few months, and that started my career at DOT. And later that year, when I went back from our senior year in college, I got a temporary job at DOT in Raleigh.
Okay.
And then so I was a temporary technician. And then after I graduated, I stayed on. A few months after graduation, I got a permanent job and worked my way up from there.
Okay. So did you start out in bridges, roads? You got a lot of different divisions there. I'm just curious.
Yeah. So in my summer job, I was an inspector. So I did miscellaneous concrete, sidewalks, things like that, resurfacing inspection, did a little surveying. I worked in an asphalt plant, testing the asphalt for a while, and kind of enjoyed that. But my temporary job, I actually drew traffic control plans.
Okay.
So like for the large construction projects, you have to manage the traffic, as you shift traffic and try to do it safely.
Right.
And so I did that for a while.
Right. So how long before you became, I'm assuming you became a division engineer at some point.
Yes.
Okay. Which division and how long did it take to get to that?
So I was division engineer in Division 5, which is the Triangle area. It's a 7-county division, starting with Wake County, Durham, Granville, Person, Franklin, Vance, and Warren. And I did that probably in 20 plus years of my career after I started. And, through your career, I think everybody should have career goals. And I've had a couple goals through my DOT career. One of them was a district engineer. One of my early jobs was assistant district engineer. I really loved it. And I thought at the time, if I could ever be district engineer one day, I would have made it.
Okay.
Well, I never was district engineer. I never had that opportunity. I kind of bypassed that. Okay. And then later in my career, as I got division engineer, I'm like, it'd be good to be chief engineer one day. Well, I never was chief engineer either.
Right.
Didn't make that.
I got you.
But about 5 years ago, I had an opportunity. The Secretary of Transportation at the time, Eric Boyette, asked me to come down to Raleigh to do some work. We were having some struggles with inflation and a lot of cost issues. And our capital plan, it's a 10-year, we call it STIP, State Transportation Improvement Plan, that had some issues. So I came down to Raleigh, and then from then on, I just had a couple other opportunities, and I was able to retire as secretary, which I'd never dreamed of or never had as a goal.
Right. Well, and you became secretary under Governor Cooper.
That's right.
And now the secretary is appointed by the governor, serves at the pleasure of the governor, and I don't know if he's on the governor's cabinet, but it's close. He's on the cabinet, right? So how did that come about? I mean, were you still the division engineer? You went from division engineer you'd come to Raleigh to work with Boyette. So were you the assistant state director?
I came to Raleigh as a deputy chief and worked there for a while, and our COO left at the time. So Secretary Boyette asked me to be COO. Okay. And so that was kind of the secretary's assistant, the professional assistant at the department.
Okay.
And so I didn't know this was going to happen. I don't know that Eric did, but then he decided to retire. And Governor Cooper had about a year and a half or so left on his administration. It was in the second term, and they asked me to be secretary.
Okay. Well,
and so
you said yes.
I said yes, definitely.
You didn't know you were going to get hit by Helene 6 months into it or whatever it was.
Yeah, about a year later.
Yeah,
Helene hit. Yeah, I don't think anybody could have envisioned the damage that we have and had in Western North Carolina, the devastation, the loss of life. And it was, even now today, if you go and just see the damage that storm wreaked on our state, it's just amazing.
Well, it's a 1,000-year storm. You know what I mean? You know, it was the perfect storm with having rained a bunch before that. And then it's basically still a hurricane when it gets all the way to the mountains. I mean, it's just really, really terrible. You know, we've had a couple of those storms come up out of the panhandle of Florida there and get to North Carolina in the last 20 years, but not quite like that. It's pretty
nothing
terrible.
with as much damage or as widespread damage.
Right. As big as it was, with as much rain as it had, and it already rained 4 or 5 inches the week before. And then it was just horrible. And I've been up there many times since then. And you're right. You can just see it. It's all over the place, and it is terrible. And those people are resilient, and they're trying. And I know Governor Stein's trying, and everybody's trying to do what they can do to try to fix that. I got one of our mutual friends told me that he could retire from DOT, go work with private contractors, and just work Helene damage for the rest of his life. And that's another 20 or 25 years and still not be done. That's how long we're talking about it's going to take to fix all the damage done from that one storm. So,
but Western North Carolina is open for business.
It is.
My wife and I went out there about a month ago, spent a few days. It's recovering. The small businesses, like you said, they're resilient. The people are resilient. And I would encourage you, if you have some time, to just go out there and just enjoy that beautiful part of our state.
It is beautiful. I did spend a couple of weeks this past summer in Banner Elk and Boone and Blowing Rock. And I mean, you can still see some of the damage there, but they've done a tremendous job. I mean, all of those communities, and the DOT for that matter, of cleaning the debris off the side of the roads and trying to get the streams open to where they flow normally, and because of all the debris in the streams and stuff like that. Well, let's road back to that plan that brought you to Raleigh initially, the 10-year road plan. It has a name. You said it was the Strategic Transportation Plan?
Yeah, the STIP is the acronym.
Okay.
So State Transportation Improvement Plan.
Okay. Now, that is the replacement for what used to be, it had another name, and it was very political as to which roads you got, and it was all about who was on the DOT board, and those jobs were very political, but it had a different name.
Well, the plan, the 10-year plan, the capital plan, it's always been the STIP.
Okay.
So, but there's a law that passed in 2013. It's called the Strategic Transportation Investment Law. And you follow that law to help populate projects into the plan.
Right. So it's not as political. It's supposed to be a scoring project.
Yeah. Before that, there was a 1989 law, and it was called the equity formula back then. And it's interesting enough, a lot of people didn't like the equity formula. The money was basically put out by population, but there was no math behind it, no data behind it. There was a lot of politics in there.
Right.
But at that time, that brought new money to DOT back in '89. And that was one of the reasons I got that temporary job my senior year in college, was because of that. So, and I jokingly say I would not have met my wife if not for the trust fund or equity formula.
I got you.
And so she was already at DOT. She's a retired DOT engineer, professional engineer for her whole career. And so I wouldn't have been at DOT. I would have been somewhere else. So in 2012, this law passed, the STI law.
Okay.
And so that put data into it.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking about. At some point, it may be the same, but it changed how they went about doing things.
Right.
And from what I've seen, for the better, I know it's helped this area get maybe more than it would have gotten otherwise. And I know some of the rural areas are complaining because maybe they're getting less than they think they should have gotten. But I think it does try to drive the money to where the traffic is, right? I mean, you know, and that's more determinative than just how powerful the board member from your part of the state is, from what I can tell. Not that you did it for a living. I'm looking at it from the outside.
It's not perfect, but it is head and shoulders above where we were with the old equity formula or trust fund. And so the funding is set into 3 basic categories: statewide tier, regional tier, and division tier. And the statewide tier, from a highway perspective, funds things like interstates and your main primary roads. The regional tier funds the other primary roads. And then the division tier funds your secondary roads. And those monies go to different ways. At the statewide tier, that's 40% of the total pot, and you compete at a statewide level.
Okay.
So the projects in Johnston County and Wake County compete against the projects in Buncombe County or New Hanover County or Guilford County at that tier.
Okay.
And so the traffic, the safety, those type of things drive a lot of that. So we compete well at that level.
Okay.
At the regional tier, that's 30% of the pot. And those dollars are divided into 7 different regions across the state. And the funding is allocated by population. So this area, this region, which are 2 divisions, they get a lot of funding for this area because of the population.
Okay.
But then you have to compete within that region for those dollars.
Right. Is that where Campo comes in?
Well, Campo comes in all of it.
Okay.
So Campo is the MPO, and the MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, is set up by federal law. And by federal law, the MPOs in the area, they're set up by Metropolitan Statistical Area. They have a primary decision-making authority on which projects get funded.
Okay.
And so the MPOs, and I think there's 20 of them across the state, working with DOT, they help develop what projects get prioritized or scored with the strategic mobility formula, which is part of that STI law.
Okay.
And so working together, they submit projects into that scoring machine, and then they score in those 3 different tiers.
Well, that's pretty cool. I didn't realize that's how it was broken down.
It really starts in the local area.
Right.
Because the Campo board, and that's the western and northern part of Johnston County is part of Campo, Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. The rest of Johnston County is part of an RPO. And
I did not know that. I thought all of Johnston County was in Campo.
No,
okay.
It's just the north and the western part.
Okay.
So Smithfield is in an RPO.
Oh,
and there's 18 RPOs, and they're set up by state law. And they basically have a similar role as an MPO. They just don't have federal support behind it because it's a state law.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
So all that works together to submit those projects to be scored or prioritized for the funding that's available.
I've been to the meetings for the expansion of 42 called Veterans Parkway from Highway 50 to Highway 70 in Clayton. It's been delayed. Do you think that project's going to happen? And if so, when?
Yeah, definitely that project's going to happen. And the delays are something that's not unusual or abnormal because of the inflation we've seen, the funding issues that we've seen, especially over the last number of years. There have been project delays all across the state. And I think a growing area like this part of Johnston County just shows that the need we have for transportation funding. Right. So that project goes into right away, I think, in the next year or so. Okay. And then goes for construction maybe in 2030. Okay. It's about a $250 million project. It's a big project.
It is. Well,
and it's needed.
Well, it's basically going to 4-lane Veterans Parkway, Highway 42, all the way from Highway
36.
50. 36 now. Golly, they keep rechanging the name all the way to Clayton. And I went to a meeting 3 or 4 years ago at Clayton about it, just looking at the drawings, and at that point, I think they were going to start construction in 2026. I know that's not happening now. But anyway, we also have the next big project, I guess, around here is they're going to finish 540 Loop. The other 540 opened a year and a half ago, and now they're working. You can really see where they're starting to cut trees and make a path for 540 to go from I-40 to Knightdale, which would complete the loop. That's right. That would also be a toll road. So 75% of 540 would be a toll road, 25% would be free. But that's going to be a big change for Johnston County, just like I think the Southern Loop has made a big change for Johnston County already as well. Yeah, and the Southern Loop's made a tremendous change. We use it on a regular basis. I do it all the time. If we're going west of Raleigh, a lot of times we'll get on the toll road and take 64 to 421 to get up to Greensboro. You just bypass all the typical congestion you see at RTP, the construction work in Orange County with I-40 being widened. It's made a big change. But that eastern, when that loop is closed, then you start giving people more choices. Right. And there's 2 active construction projects now to finish the loop, and they're both about 25 or 30% done. But those are big projects. It's about $900 million or so total, and so it'll be 2028 before they're done, and traffic is on that last section of the loop. Right. Well, it's exciting. I remember, when they did the first section in the late 90s, I guess, of 540. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what I mean? And my uncle had moved from Ebenezer Church Road to what I thought was the end of the earth up Creedmoor Road. And he was like, well, they're going to put 540 here and it's going to outer loop. And I mean, it's unbelievable now. I mean, I would go up there and think we have left the universe. And now he's a mile and a half from 540. So, I mean, and it's houses everywhere.
It's amazing how close that seems now.
Right. And how Creedmoor Road isn't that much wider, and it's really got a lot of traffic on it. But it's absolutely amazing. Those are the two biggest projects I think that people will see around here immediately, especially in Western Johnston County. When they do the 4236 Veterans Parkway expansion and then the new 540. I'm just curious because I go that way all the time. Do you know when they're supposed to be done with that project around Chapel Hill? They've been doing it for a couple of years. They're making progress. I'm just curious. I haven't looked it up on the website.
I don't know exactly. Right. It's at least another year out, I would say, but it may be more than that. But I don't know.
Well, anyway, that's going to be nice because that's going to add those lanes on Durham Chapel Hill, and that's going to make it easier to get over to the 8540 connection.
Right. There'll be 3 lanes in each direction once that's done, all the way through Durham and Orange County.
That'll be really nice.
Have family law questions? Need guidance to navigate legal challenges? The compassionate team at Breeden Law Office is here to help. Visit us at www.breedenfirm.com for practical advice, resources, or to book a consultation. Remember, when life gets messy, you don't have to face it alone.
One of the things I wanted you to talk about, and I know we don't have a ton more time, is all the things DOT covers. I think people don't understand that the Department of Transportation has railroads, it has airports. I used to always harass you about RDU and the new RDU runway, which they are now working on. And, I don't think people realize it's also bike paths. I mean, it's all really modes of transportation. So talk about a little bit about what you were responsible for, and because that's the part that I don't think people see.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, when they think of DOT, they think of potholes and traffic signals and roundabouts and four-way stops and things like that. The road that I want to have widened because it's congested, or the road I don't want to have widened because it impacts my property. Right. Those are the typical things that people think about, but DOT is so much more than that. I mean, we have the second largest highway system in the whole nation behind Texas, and people don't know that. We maintain over 80,000 miles of roads, the state does, in North Carolina. There aren't county roads in North Carolina. Right. And we're one of about 10 states that have no county-maintained roads, that the state has from the cul-de-sac with 4 homes on it to I-40 with 120,000 cars a day on it. So in addition to that, we have a ferry system. We have the second largest state-maintained ferry system in the country behind Washington State. And so that's big for us, and that's transportation. Those ferries, in a way, are moving bridges. They're transporting people to work, to home, to the doctor, to school. We have school buses that ride the ferries to get kids from where they live to their school. We have bike and ped and transit. You mentioned the greenways, so the sidewalks and the greenways, we handle that. We have a division of aviation that we help support the public airports in the state, from the big ones like RDU and Charlotte and Greensboro to the mid-sized ones like Johnston County, and Raleigh Executive Airport, and the many, many others like that. And we support those with projects to lengthen runways or clear obstructions or new runway lighting systems or control towers, like is under construction here in Johnston County now. Right. We help support that. We have a rail division, and we support railroad projects for freight and passenger rail in North Carolina. So it's the whole gamut of transportation when you can think about it.
Well, it really is. And I enjoy riding the ferries and driving my car up and riding the ferry across. Yeah. And I think that's neat. And they used to have, I guess they still do, one was NC State, one was Carolina. They have one would be red, one had the NC State logo, one had the Carolina logo. I think one had a Duke logo. So anyway, those were always a lot of fun. And I mean, that you're right about the schools and stuff. You think about, you get out there and the sort of Outer Banks and Ocracoke and stuff like that. So yeah, and I think the ferries are neat. I think there's been some funding issues with the ferries and whether they should start charging a fare and what they should charge and if they raise more. That debate's always going to rage on. But I do think that they're neat. And if you've never ridden one, you should go out and ride one, particularly the one to Ocracoke. I think that's great. I think Ocracoke is the neatest place. One of the neatest places I've been in the entire world is Ocracoke. You go to the British cemetery there and all of that stuff. They have the British flags and the little shops and stuff. So big fan of Ocracoke and that part of the world. So yeah, so it's a lot more common misconceptions about DOT. Other than one of them is all this other stuff that you're responsible for other than the road. What would you say are other misconceptions the public has in general?
I think, and we've talked a little bit about funding and project delays, right. And I think a big one that people don't think about or don't understand is how much money it takes to build these projects.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And so they think, why am I paying so much for gas? The gas tax is too high. In North Carolina, the transportation budget is big. It's about $7 or $8 billion, and that's all in for construction, maintenance, operations. It pays, most of that's contracted out to private industry. But again, there's 80,000 miles of roads in North Carolina. I was just reading something last week. One of our states, nearby states in the southeast Florida, they have 12,000 miles of road that they're responsible for at Florida DOT. Their budget is $15 billion. And so you start comparing ourselves to others and seeing how woefully behind we are with what we put in transportation compared to a lot of our counterparts. And that's why you look at having to potentially look at fares or tolls on ferries. That's why we're having to toll 540 and look at all those different tools in the toolbox. We do look, or the state does look at public-private partnerships to help fund to kind of overcome that shortfall. Is 2030 too late to start the 40 Veterans Parkway 36 widening?
Right.
Definitely it is.
Yeah.
It's probably too late to have it finished.
Right.
Based on the growth and the traffic and everything. We've been in this area since 94. When we came here, we went to Smithfield to the outlets to shop or Raleigh to shop and eat. But now you've got all that here and people want to be here. We've got great community. We've got great people here in Johnston County. And we need to have that infrastructure that supports them. But it takes money to do that.
Right. Well, I mean, is the gas tax the answer? Because that's what we do in North Carolina, but cars become more efficient, electric cars. Like, is it a sustainable funding source?
So long term, the answer to that's no. I mean, in North Carolina, our gas tax revenue is still growing, but it's growing because we're a growing state. If you look at the per capita numbers, it's falling because the cars get better mileage now. There's more electric cars out there, and so your longer term, you've got to look for ways to offset that. You've got to look for ways, is it a mileage fee? Is it a user fee? And there's pluses and minuses for all of that. I will say this, whatever it is, it will not be easy or as cheap to collect as the gas tax.
Right. That's true. That's true. The gas tax is easy to collect.
You don't pay the gas tax. I don't pay the gas tax at the pump. It's paid at the depots.
Okay.
And so the wholesalers pay the tax.
Oh.
And so the individual stations do not. So anything else you do is going to move to some sort of individual payment tax, either through your annual registration fees, property taxes, or a mileage fee, whatever that is. All of a sudden it goes from getting monthly checks from a handful of businesses to getting monthly, quarterly, annual checks from thousands and thousands of citizens. And it's going to be expensive to collect.
I got you. Yeah. Well, anyway, one of the things you were in charge of was the Department of Motor Vehicles. And I know things are going to get better there. They're already getting better as we're recording this in the middle of December of 2025. I think the new person there in charge, you worked with him. I think he's going to do a good job. But again, I think that was largely funding. I've been friends with Wayne Goodwin a long time. I think you had a state grow a whole bunch of people and they didn't have any extra examiners or extra offices.
Yeah, and DMV is, there's a TV show about a DMV now, and it's kind of the butt of everybody's jokes over the years. But through my career, and especially these last 5 years, I could have retired many, many times. But there are a lot of things I wanted to work on to see finished. And it was funny, not that I gave up on DMV, but we got the right man in the job with Commissioner Paul Tyne. We were able to get some legislative changes this past year, able to get a little bit more money, and things are on the upswing. And I finally had to make a decision and say, I can't stay here until DMV's fixed. It's headed in a good direction, and we've got good leadership in. The morale is going up for the employees, and I'm really proud to what they've done over these last few months with legislative support and with support from the governor's office, and I'm looking forward to seeing the continued progress there.
Right. Well, good. Well, the last couple questions here. What are you doing now other than playing golf a little bit?
So playing a little golf. Need to play more.
You probably need to play more. But anyway, but I think you're doing something else too.
Yeah. So I'm starting a consulting business. So it's Hopkins Strategy and Infrastructure Advisors. And at the first of the year, I'll really have my first client and start helping grow some transportation business for some other folks.
Okay. So are you going to work for some of the contractors that work with DOT?
That's yet to be determined, but
okay.
my first client will be a non-traditional transportation firm.
Okay.
Yeah, and so more to come on that later.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know you're excited about that after many years of stress and not sleeping during Helene and all of that. But we got through it. I mean, and you had a lot to do with that, and you'll probably never get the credit you deserve for what you did in that, but you had a lot of help too.
You mentioned our mutual friend, and it really takes a lot of people but I'm really proud of what DOT's been able to accomplish over this last 14, 15 months or so since Helene hit, and that with our contracting partners and consulting partners, the utility companies, the volunteers, there is really true progress out there. And there's DOT, just to kind of put a bow on it, spent more money in the first year after Helene, 4 times as much money as we did the biggest storm that we've ever fought in this state or ever responded to.
That's something else.
And it's really been amazing just to see the progress. And, the employees that we have, they live in the communities they work in. It's personal to them. They're helping their families. They're helping their friends. They're helping their associates. And they really want to see it through. And that's one thing that DOT and Johnston County have in common. It really is a family.
Well, and you think about the people out there, these workers, my friends, your employees, your friends, left their homes where they didn't have power.
Yeah.
Their families were cut off to go and help other people, and worked 17, 18, 19 hours a day, 28, 30, 35, 40 straight days while they didn't have power. They didn't have water, but they had this thing that they had to help their community. I don't think people understand how much these employees sacrificed and what they had to do to just how far they had to drive to find clean water for their employees and their community. You know what I mean? Right. It was just, anyway, we could do 5 podcasts on what happened, and entire areas being cut off for all the interstates. And anyway, but yeah, so they did it, and they didn't mind doing it, and saw the earth, and it's tremendous. Last question we ask everybody is, what do you love most about Johnston County?
It's the people. We moved out here. I was a staff engineer at DOT working downtown Raleigh. Moved out to Johnston County, had great neighbors, got involved in the community, and we're members at Amelia Christian Church. I'm a member of Clayton Civitan. A few years after that, I started working in Durham in a division office, and my commute went from 20 minutes to an hour on a good day, and we never moved. Because we were involved and ingrained in our community, and we just love it here.
Well, that's great. That's great. Well, we'd like to thank Joey Hopkins for being our guest on this week's episode of the Best of Johnston County Podcast. As we mentioned earlier, please like, follow, subscribe to this podcast wherever you've seen it. Give us a 5-star review down below, and tag us in your Instagram stories, Best of Johnston County. Until next time, I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden.
That's the end of today's episode of Best of Johnston County, a show brought to you by the trusted team at Breeden Law Office. We thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to sharing more interesting facets of this community next week. Every story, Every viewpoint adds another thread to the rich tapestry of Johnston County. If the legal aspects highlighted raise some questions, help is just around the corner at www.breedenfirm.com.